Today's talk is interesting. Mountain climbing. Mountain climbing. Of course, this mountain is different. Okay. Tom said that he did that all his life. Every day he's doing mountain climbing. All right. So, Dr. Simone Silvestri will show us how to climb the Doctoral mountain. All right. So this is your stage now, okay? I would like to remind you that this is a 15-minute talk. Yeah. So I'll remind you at 45. All right, so this is your stage. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending this talk. Thank you, Frank, for the introduction. I apologize, I changed the title. Oh, well, I guess it's going to work anyway. So, this was me 15 years ago when I was exactly in your shoes. I just graduated from my PhD. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had more questions than answers. I wasn't sure about how to write papers, do research, and so many uncertainties. And, throughout these years since then, please.
That's you?
Yeah. 15 years, look how much things change. Anyway. So, then since then, I had some fantastic mentors. I also mentor my own students. Some of them probably you know. For example, Shu was here since last semester. Now she's a faculty at Kennesaw. Some of you may also remember Enrico. Now he's a faculty at Penn State. Vijay has been here a few years ago. Now he's a faculty at NC State, and he's doing fantastic. So if anyone is interested in wireless communication, it's definitely the guy to go to. And I also have several fantastic visiting students, postdocs, et cetera, they work with me throughout these years. I also have been director of graduate studies for a while now. And so I kind of gain a certain experience about mentoring students. And so I thought maybe, this advice that I'm sharing with my own students could be useful also to other students as well. And so I said, you know what, after thinking, I was like, fine, let's do this. And I started this YouTube channel that probably many of you have heard about. And this thing is actually going better than I thought. So there I talk about how to write papers, how to make presentations, how to use AI for scientific writing, tips for PhD success, how to deal an interview, what skills you should develop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, honestly, this thing is going pretty amazing. I gave several talks. I'm going to give another one in a couple of days at Virginia Tech about this, and so this is actually my chance to practice the talk before I actually do it. And so today I'm going to condensate some of this content and deliver it to you. And so I'm very glad to see here students that are not necessarily computer scientists, so I'm very happy to hear from everybody, but also specifically from them, how this kind of advice resonates with your experience in your field, because even if you're all in engineering, sometimes you just step a little bit on the side, and then maybe some advice that matter in one field don't matter in the other. So I'm kind of curious to see what you think about that. Anyway, let's start. There's a lot of things to say. And the first thing we're going to talk about is how to set your PhD goals. So, one simple and straightforward way to have an idea of how to set my PhD goals or your PhD goals would be to look at what is the minimum requirement in order to graduate at your institution. And so sometimes institutions don't even have this minimum requirement. Sometimes it's so low that really just targeting that as your objective would not really guarantee you to get the job that you would like afterwards. Okay? And so it's not definitely something that I recommend. And what I do think it's important is to tailor the objective for your graduation based on each student and based on what each student wants to do after graduation. And this is something that you should try to figure out as soon as possible, because really you don't have many years of PhD in front of you. And here in the US, usually it's 4 or 5. For example, we have one Italian student here. So for us, it's just 3 years. So in 3 years, boom, you're done. And they're like, what happened? And then you need to decide where to go and what to do. So if you haven't worked towards that goal, you may be a little bit too late to try to do something afterwards. So, and of course, it's important to decide what you want to do. It's important to discuss that with your advice in order to make a plan to achieve those goals, and also make sure that both of you are on the same boat. So the question that is often related to this is, the following one. So should I publish in a top conference or journal with a very low acceptance rate? So it's a high chance that your paper gets rejected. Or should I publish maybe in a lower level conference, kind of medium tier or lower, in which the acceptance rate is very high, and there is a higher chance that my paper is going to be accepted. And so, of course, there are some straightforward considerations. So, for example, if your paper is not good, no need to submit it to a high-quality conference. But there are other ones that are more tailored to that specific student. So, for example, how much time do you have for graduation? It doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but sometimes the fact that your paper is of very high quality is no guarantee that it's going to be accepted. So these conferences, as we're going to talk about later in this talk, have extremely low acceptance rate. And even good papers sometimes just don't make it. So if you have a long time in front of you, maybe you can improve it, resubmit it, and then you're going to be fine. But if you're planning to graduate next semester, then maybe this is something to take into account to decide where you want to submit your paper as well. Also, what you're going to do if it gets rejected. Are you going to resubmit it? Are you going for a journal? Are you going to extend it? So it would be good to have a plan for that as well. And also, a little bit about your mental health. So us as faculty work kind of a different time scale, if you want. So for me, if a paper gets accepted, let's say this semester, next year, after being rejected 3 times, hey, who cares? Like, it's going to be exactly the same. On my CV, it's going to be fine. When you have, at a certain stage, it doesn't really matter, okay? Well, for you, it does, because you have strict deadlines, you have qualifying examination, you have depth requirement, you have the PhD defense, and then maybe you want to apply for a job, and so you want to show that you have done these things. And so dealing with a lot of rejections for you, it's kind of different. It's a lot more pressure, okay? And so I had papers that got rejected maybe 2 or 3 times. And so at that time, maybe, it's fair to say, okay, maybe we should stop targeting the top places and try to lower the expectations a little bit, because it's actually good. And this is probably a suggestion also for advisors and not necessarily just for PhD students, to try to make sure that students get tangible achievements that help build their trust, their confidence, and so that maybe they don't publish the top paper at the beginning, but at the same time, they kind of have this feeling that they're making good progress, they're getting some scientific publications done, and then they will build on top of that and work better, and so help their mental health as well. And of course, part of answering this question of where to publish your paper also has to do of what you want to do after you graduate. And so here I'm going to give you just a few high-level examples of how different situations can be when you actually are in a PhD. So, for example, we have some students in this program who are, for example, retired. They say, you know what? I'm bored of being home and watch TV. I want to get a PhD in computer science. Well, why not? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But clearly, it's very different from someone that, maybe is like 25 years old or something, and, needs to go in the job market, find a job, build a family, buy a house, etc. It's a completely stage of life. Or maybe students that are already working, and they just need the title. They don't really need this long list of amazing publications. They just need the PhD title to maybe get the next step in their job, get a promotion or something like that. So in this case, for example, it may not be needed to publish in the top places. Who cares, right? You still get published. And so there are today's conferences that offer a huge plethora of opportunities of publishing. You can have full papers, of course, but you can have short papers. You can have work in progress. You can have demo papers. You can have PhD forum papers, and all sorts of variations that are still published work and, can contribute towards your graduation as well. Do they contribute the same as the main paper on a very, very prestigious conference? No, but it's still something good that you can show. And again, it could very well meet the minimum requirement for your institutions, and so you could graduate as well. Or, for example, this is one situation. Otherwise, you may have people that want to go to industry. And so in this case, it may be very useful to work on practical problems. Also work with advisors that work on practical problems and have connections with institutions. It's good to do internships. So the experience that you want to build is different compared to the experience, for example, of the retired person or someone that may want to do a teaching faculty, a postdoc, or a faculty position afterwards. And also in this case, for example, publishing top venues, it may have a benefit, but not necessarily the same than if you want to go in academia afterwards. Different, again, if you want to be a teaching faculty. So obviously here, what matters the most is the teaching, not the most. What also matters is the teaching experience. So you need to have some publications, but maybe not necessarily stellar publications, because research is going to be a very small part of the job that you're going to do after you graduate, while teaching, it is something that you're going to do after you graduate. So if you have teaching experience, for example, as a teaching assistant, maybe as a teaching assistant that was the main instructor of a class, and you can show grade evaluation for that class. That matters a lot versus having, let's say, a SICOM paper or, I don't know, versus a more medium tier conference paper, okay? And of course, things change if you want to stay in academia and you want to invest towards finding a job in academia. Then at that time is when exactly publishing in top venues, extremely selective, is important. So you have a very well-rounded CV. You need to have mentor students, undergraduate, and potentially young graduate students. So you kind of need to tailor your what you're going to do throughout your PhD based on what you want to do next. So the sooner you can figure out what you want to do, the better it is, okay? So, and it also is very important that you discuss this with your advisor as soon as possible, and both of you make a plan and both of you are on the same page. Because for each advisor, hiring a student is a highly costly investment, and so you want to make sure in terms of time, in terms of money, etc., effort, and so you want to make sure that you both know what you want to do next and make sure that you're working in the best way in order to achieve those goals. Okay, let's move to another topic, and these are common mistakes that PhD students make. So PhD, as I mentioned before, is a relatively short time, and if you start getting bad habits, this can actually slow down you a lot. It can reduce your progress. They can even block your progress completely in the worst case. And so, probably actually in the worst case, you may even quit your PhD entirely. And we had a few cases of this, and in my experience, in my career, and not necessarily my students, but students that I have mentored somehow. And this is a very unfortunate situation. So these things can be prevented as long as we are able to recognize that there is something that is going wrong, and then we can try to work on them in order to work on these problems in order to try to solve them. So let's start from some common mistakes. So one is focusing too much on taking classes and teaching if you're a TA, and feeling that you're making great progress towards your PhD. Then you arrive in year 3 or year 4 and say, okay, now I taught a lot, I'm done with classes. What have you done in research? Very, very little. And so it's late. You don't have a lot of time. So the feeling of being busy doesn't mean that you're actually achieving a lot. And this is especially true for TAs that in addition to their classes, they also need to teach, they need to grade, they need to have office hours, lab hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, oh my God, I'm so busy, I must be doing great. No, not necessarily, okay? So what can you do to avoid this? Then first, realize that research progress is what really matters for graduation. Second, start research immediately. So even if you're a TA, start research the first semester. Contact an advisor, find a research problem, start reading papers. Maybe the progress are going to be slow at the beginning because you are taking classes, because you're going to be so busy, but you are making progress. And so maybe by the time you are done with classes, you have a paper that is almost ready, maybe ready to be submitted, and so you're already going to have a publication before the time becomes a little bit more manageable. You're going to be a little less busy than you used to be. And of course, and this is something that's going to come up over and over and over in this presentation, seek feedback from advisors, from mentors, from peers, to see if you're doing well, if you are kind of meeting what the expectations should be, and what they are doing, what they see as success, how am I doing? So feedback and the ability to get feedback is extremely important from people that you trust, that can give you their opinion about how you are doing, and then maybe sometimes you change, what you're doing. For me, for example, when I was a student, as you probably many of you know, I like to ride horses, and my advisor one day said, "You're riding too many horses. You should do more research." And she was right, because I didn't have so many years when I was a PhD to make progress, and maybe that wasn't the best time of my life to spend more time riding horses. It's different when you're a professor now, right? That you can do This was just a joke, but it's true. I mean, it's very important that you seek feedback and make sure that you're working in the right direction. Another problem that I've seen is being isolated. And what I mean by being isolated, so this can generally come either from the student or from the advisor. From the student is when the student doesn't want to seek for that feedback that I was just mentioning. The student wants to just be in the lab, doesn't want to talk to anybody, just want to work on their own code. So the meeting with the advisor tend to be very short, minimum exchange of information, not a lot of progress being done, and then they can run to the lab and go back and close themselves and go keep doing what they're doing. This is not good. Okay, there needs to be a constant feedback, constant regular meetings. Make sure that you're making progress, even if the feedback is negative. It's good. It's better to have negative feedback now than when you're going to get your paper rejected maybe 6 months or a year down the road because you didn't get that feedback that you would have had a long time ago and you could have fixed it when you had time to do that. Of course, this can also happen because of the advisor. And this is a very delicate topic, but unfortunately it happens. And I'm not going to dig too much into it today, but it can happen that some advisor tends to be very controlling. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know who you talk to. You want to know what you say. They want to know what other people tell you. Or maybe they don't want other people to talk to you at all. And so I hope this is not the case for anybody here, but this is wrong. Okay? And things get delicate, and these are better discussions for a one-on-one talk. But in general, you may have a wrong advisor. And if that is the case, as for everything, it's better to realize it early than to realize it later. It's a difficult thing to deal with, and the suggestion is always to talk to someone that is a little bit higher in the chain of command. So in this case, for example, for our department, it would be me or it would be Dr. Fay. But it's always a situation that requires some delicate conversation in order to be addressed. But it can be the case. And if that's the case, it's better to realize it rather than suffering for many years and then maybe quitting. And hopefully nobody wants to get there, right? So, of course, what you should do, meet with your advisor regularly and hopefully build a good relationship with your advisor so that you can trust your advisor. Build a network of mentors. I cannot stress enough how important this is. So your advisor most likely is going to be one of the mentors for your life, but you need to build more. This could be other professors in your department. It could be some of your peers. It could be people that you meet at conferences. Start building these personal connections now, because one day when you're going to be a professional, those connections will matter. I mean, some that I, for example, met when I was a student, now are some of my mentors, people that I can call and say, hey, I don't know, what should I do about this job opportunity that came up? Or should I take this service that I've been offered or not? Difficult question that you don't know really how to answer by yourself, and those mentors are those that can provide you useful feedback. And also connect with your colleagues, participate in student associations. So for example, here we have the, I don't remember how ADC is called now, I guess, right? Yeah, so this ADC association, so make sure to be involved with them, talk to your peers, try to get feedback from them as well, because they can give you a different perspective that maybe faculty and advisor may not be able to share. So that's what you should look like. Should be yourself, surrounded by peers, advisor, member, and a professional network that you have around you. And not something like that. If you feel something like that, something is wrong, okay? Another common problem is to lose the big picture. And this can happen for, millions of reasons. For example, I had students sometimes that spent a week trying to improve their code or organize their code. So what have you done this week? My code looks better. Who cares? Okay, so I want the result. I don't give a crap that the code is just nicely and organized, and now all the links and references work. Is it smoother? It's faster? I mean, okay, you save 5 seconds of your life. That's great. And this is just, of course, one example. Another one could be that try to edit a paper over and over and over and over and over. At some point, you get like a fixed point in which you're not really improving anymore, but you try to do it just because you think, oh, maybe I can do better. Maybe I can do better. So at some point, you need to realize this is what I can do. Maybe now it's a good time to get feedback from someone, etc. I mean, there could be many, many different reasons, and there is this also this famous quote from Einstein that basically, if you knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. So it's kind of a fundamental component of research that you don't know what you're doing. You don't know, the advisor doesn't know, nobody really knows. Okay, but at some point you have enough to make a paper, and then you don't know again, and then you keep going. So it's kind of a natural process. That's really how it goes. And sometimes you start on one point, and you end up completely on a different point, because at the beginning you didn't know what would be the discoveries that you would do along the path, or how things will look, etc. So what can you do to try to prevent this mistake? Learn to be efficient and effective. I'm going to talk a little bit about time management here, but in general, you really need to learn how to prioritize what matters versus what matters less. And this comes with experience, comes from feedback, again, from advisors, from mentors, from peers. That's why that is another reason why this is so important. And during the meetings with your advisor, use those meetings to refocus, to start the meeting with a brief presentation about what you're doing and why. And I had many meetings with students, especially with younger students, that they sit down and say, okay, so remember we were doing this graph. So this graph here, it looks like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm barely remembering what their name is sometimes, okay? So I cannot remember what they're working on. I do not remember last week when we met what was the last thing that they have done. And I do not remember, I do not know what they did during the week. So I know that you have just stopped working on this thing and you have been working so hard on it, but I haven't. So make sure that we are both on the same page before we start talking about what you have accomplished this week. And this is also useful for you because sometimes asking yourself, why am I doing this? It kind of, make you have a step back, look at what you're doing, and try to find a reason in order to make progress in the direction that you need to go. And that reason sometimes can be confusing, and so this is the actual time in which it's useful to step back. And this happens also to explain your research to someone that has no knowledge about it. And I mean, your grandma could be a good example, but not necessarily. So if you're not able to explain things in simple words to people that are not expert, then maybe you don't really know why you're doing what you're doing. And knowing it, it's very good to then develop not only your research plan, but also to find a job one day. You meet someone that is not necessarily in your field and you want to explain, so what is your research about? And if you get too nerdy, too many details, that person is not going to understand anything. It's like, okay, thank you, interesting. While if you're able to engage them with a catching conversation that motivates why the problem you're working is so important. And then you get more technical and give more details depending on how the conversation goes. This is way, way more effective, okay? Let's keep going. Now, poor time management, it's obviously one of the main problem. It applies to everybody, okay? It does not apply to students, applies to faculty, applies to postdocs and people who work in industry. And I think these days it's even a bigger problem than it used to be because we are so bombarded by good reason to get distracted. Okay, so your watch vibrates, your phone dings, and then there is a new email or it's a new episode of Netflix, or someone writes you on Facebook. There's so many things that happen. There is always a good reason to switch to something and then switch back. And as you know, if you have done operating systems, context switch tends to be very inefficient. And so your brain just gets slower, you get distracted, and then you make less progress. And of course, there could be other reasons as well. So for example, you would be a perfectionist, as we mentioned before, that's always trying to get things perfect before even assuming that you made any progress. Or you may lack a method in order to get things done that actually work for yourself. So some suggestions to deal with this. Of course, there are books that you can read, the resources online, so do not think this one slide is going to give you all the answers that you want, but some things to think about. So probably the best suggestion that I think all PhD students can have is to work consistently. Progress is not made the day before the deadline. It's made building little by little from today until you reach the deadline. Working consistently, making little progress every day, it's really what gets you to achieve what you want and not last-minute giant effort. Then find a method that works for you. So we are not all the same. So for example, I work well in the morning. And my students know because sometimes they see my emails at 6 a.m. in the morning. But then, around 4 p.m., my brain is done. Like, I foggy, and yeah, I can answer emails, but I cannot really do anything that is really productive, okay? And so everyone is different. Some people are completely opposite. In the morning, they just better don't do anything, and then later in the afternoon, they wake up and they can work late at night. So try to do the tasks that are more demanding in the time that you're more productive. So don't waste those hours to do the things that are more irrelevant. For example, answering emails. Okay, so focus for those hours on things that really matter. For example, you're writing a paper, focus on writing a paper. You're trying to solve some difficult problem in your code, focus on that. And then leave the remaining tasks for those hours in which, anyway, you're fried, and so let's just do those, everyday tasks that you need to do anyway. So know your weakness. Also, if you're a perfectionist, sometimes it's useful to know the 80-20 rule, which basically in this context means that in order to achieve 80% of the quality, it generally takes 20% of the time. But in order to achieve that 20% extra quality, to achieve 100, you need to spend 80% of the time. So it's a trade-off. And sometimes achieve perfection is not needed. And of course, which level I should achieve, and this comes with experience. Okay, you should talk to your advisor, you should talk to mentors, and try to understand eventually, okay, this is enough, I can stop here. But be aware of this trade-off, because sometimes it's just a waste of time to keep trying to improve something that is already good. Okay? Also, something extremely important, learn to say no. And this is something that is very important across everybody's career. You're going to be offered to do things that sometimes are good for you and sometimes are not good for you. Sometimes are things that you have to do anyway, but sometimes are things that you actually can't say no. And so having the ability to say, I'm sorry, I really would like to do this, but I don't think I have the bandwidth to do it now, I think it's important. It's something you should be aware of. And of course, the main challenge here is to understand when is the right time to say no. And that's another good reason to have mentors, because sometimes you don't know. You don't know if this is a good opportunity or it's not a good opportunity. If I get asked, for example, to be in the technical program committee of a conference, it's like, should I say yes or no? I know it's going to be a lot of workload, but it's something that's going to be useful on my CV. Well, it depends. Okay? And so that's where the advisor and mentors are very useful as well. So definitely a skill that it's important to develop. And of course, there are a bunch of standard techniques that you can use. So for example, you can block time and say, okay, from this hour to this hour, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to do anything else. You can turn off notifications on your phone, tablet, watch, laptop, whatever you use. Also, another suggestion is do not check emails to start the day. I do it every morning. I wake up, pick up my phone, and see who wrote me at night. But it may not be that good for your brain. You can put your phone in a box, turn it off, and forget it exists for a while. Also, this is my personal opinion. I don't really think AI is going to help you a lot saving your time. It can help for certain tasks, but do not rely on it in order to become more efficient. You need to become more efficient yourself. Okay, then the next topic I want to talk about is how to deal with paper rejections and what to do about it. So this comes back a little bit to the question that we had before. So should I submit a paper at a top conference with low acceptance rate or a lower conference with higher acceptance rate? So let's look at this a little deeper. So first off, rejections are common. Everybody in this room, especially the faculty that are here, received way more rejections than you can imagine. Okay, we don't keep track of it, but if we should make a CV of the rejections that we got, it would be way, way longer than it is now. Then, societies in general, like IEEE, ACM, etc., they require a maximum acceptance rate that you cannot go above. Generally, this is 30% these days, but the very good conferences are way, way lower than that. So, for example, CCOM, I don't know if you know these ones, but these are just examples in my field. And they could be between 8 and 16, PERCOM 17, but these 17, so for example, they accept about, 12 or 13 papers a year, and maybe they have 200 submissions, 300 submissions. Can you imagine how hard it is to get in that top papers that get accepted? And then KDD also 16%, etc. So it's unavoidable. The point is, even good papers are going to get rejected, and you cannot do anything about it. Okay, so it's becoming aware of this is kind of say, okay, maybe it's not necessarily that my research sucks. Maybe it's not necessarily that the universe is against me. This is just part of the process. And yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I mean, generally the researchers that are most successful are those that failed the most and kept trying, and not necessarily those that always get paper accepted. So why papers get rejected? So there is a component that is luck. So reviewers are grumpy people. I am one. I review way too many papers. I don't want to review all these papers. I review a lot of papers that I know nothing about, like one yesterday on quantum computing. Well, actually, maybe you should have done it. I have no idea what this thing is, and I still need to write a review. And so, you know, sometimes I'm just looking for a good reason to get rid of this thing in front of me, and that's it. And that's bad luck. You know, it's bad luck. And I think it's a big problem in academia that would require an entire conversation by itself. But it is what it is. So sometimes you find the grumpy reviewer, I think they call it reviewer 2 these days, but regardless, it could be any number. They just found the first reason I didn't like the abstract. Rejected. It happens. It doesn't need to be this extreme. But so, I mean, reviewers jump entire sections of papers. They don't read the details. And so maybe you say, oh, you didn't mention this, and maybe you did. And so bad luck is a component, but it's not the only component. Sometimes you may have sent the paper in a wrong venue that doesn't fit the topic, or maybe the venue is too selective, it doesn't align very well with the CFP of this year, etc. Or maybe there is something wrong with the paper. So for example, the writing could be poor, there is no consistent story, the novelty may not be there, or maybe is there, but you didn't explain it very well. And there could be, of course, technical problems, the results could be unconvincing. And so let me next slide. And what can you do about potential this problem? Of course, writing is something you need to practice. My papers sucked when I was a student. I remember sitting next to my advisor, and I wrote, I don't know, maybe a column, and it was destroyed. So it takes time to develop as a skill. Times in which you need to try, write, get feedback, then try again, write, get feedback, and so on. Okay. But in general, what are the best practices? So first, keep a positive attitude. As I said, rejections are common. We cannot avoid them. We all got them. You're going to get a bunch in your career. So just accept it, okay? Don't get stressed. Don't get negative about it. Some people take it very personally. It's like, oh, these people don't understand anything. They're not good scientists. Like, that's just how things work, okay? We need to accept it. Then read reviewers with an open mind. Maybe you did miss something. Maybe you didn't make things very clear. Maybe you wrote the paper with in mind someone which is a highly level expert in that field, and the reviewer wasn't. And so, you know, maybe something that you thought was obvious, it wasn't for that person. And so it didn't give you a good score. So also be ready to work hard when you get the reviews. Do not just get the paper and say, yeah, whatever, I submit it somewhere else and see how it goes. You're not just throwing a coin. So those acceptance rates are not coins that are flipped for each paper, and then if you're lucky, it gets accepted. Okay, so you can do things to improve the chances that your paper gets eventually accepted. But to do that, sometimes you need to work hard. You need to do extra experiments. You need to change some of your assumptions. You need to compare with other approaches that you have not considered before, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, find a good venue, of course, that can fit your submission. Sometimes, for example, this may mean not to target the top venue, but maybe target something a little lower, as we mentioned at the beginning. And also, as I was mentioning, look for feedback before submission. It's better to get feedback before you submit than get it from the reviewers. So get the papers read, of course, by your advisor, but also by your peers, maybe some other people that are in your department or that you met at conferences that maybe are in the TPC, in the technical program committee of these conferences, that can tell you, hey, I know you're in the technical program committee, I know you have reviewed many of these papers, would you mind looking at it? And honestly, you know, if someone gives me a paper, let's say for Infocom, and I can read the first 2 pages and give you an idea if it has a chance or has no chance. And it's not that I am like this big oracle that come from God, but you read so many of these that you get a feeling that that is actually a topic and there is sufficient contribution, novelty, everything is there, or is not. And so like me, many others faculty that have been in this job for a while can. And also it helps to review papers yourself, because if your advisor say, hey, can you review this paper for me, spend time on it, write a good review, be fair, make sure that so that what I tend to say, write the reviews the way in which you would like your papers to be reviewed. And it takes time, but you can learn a lot from that process. Being critics of others also helps to be critics of yourself. And of course, you should be fair and say, if I criticize them for something that was missing in that paper, well, then maybe this is missing also in my paper. It's just an example, but it can happen. Okay, let me talk about this. Probably I don't have time to talk about everything I wanted to, but so another problem that I've observed in academia in general, in PhD students in particular, is the imposter syndrome. So anyone here has felt that everybody around them is more competent than them? Everybody around them is more productive, is more successful, and that all the accomplishments that you got are not really something you deserve, but just the result of luck. And your research is worthless while you're surrounded by people that have these amazing ideas that are changing the world, and whatever you're doing, it counts nothing. And then you are an imposter, and the next time you're going to give a presentation, talk to your advisor, talk to your peers, give a job talk, someone is going to stand up and tell you, you do not deserve this. You are an imposter. Your stuff is completely crap. So how many of you have felt this way? I do. I do these days, okay? So this is kind of a mindset that is very hard to break. And of course, this presentation is not going to really make you overcome this. But I have this all the time, okay? So I go give these talks, and then I say, here you go. Now this is the time that I say, what the hell are you saying? This is nothing, okay? So what we can try to do, this is common. It's very common in academia, and it's common also because we are surrounded by people that are so successful. So for example, this is the actual Google Scholar of a guy that we just invited to be the keynote speaker for a conference I'm organizing. I mean, look how many citations this guy has. Look, he gets more citations in 1 year than some people get in all their life. Like, of course you feel like you're nothing, okay? And this guy, it's an actual guy. I mean, you can find it. So it's kind of unavoidable, okay? You are surrounded by, amazing people that have worked hard for all their life. So, okay, let's move forward. So what can we do about it? So first, try to realize that do not confuse talent with experience. So obviously, if someone has done this job for 20, 25 years, 30 years or more, they have more experience than you. They seem to come out with these outstanding ideas just because they have gained so many experience before, and you maybe just started, that you cannot compare. It's not that they are particularly geniuses. It's that they just have more experience than you do. And you can build that experience. You can just work hard and achieve there. And as I said before, consistency pays off more than talent. So talented people that don't work consistently achieve less, in my opinion, than people that are less talented but work more consistently. So work more, work hard, and you can achieve what you want. Also, another thing that I think it's important to realize is that success can have different meaning for different people. So having the highest number of citations may not be what you really want to do in life. Okay, maybe you also want to have a well-balanced life with, I don't know, a family or fishing if you like to fish or whatever you like to do, helping students, whatever it is that makes you happy, that is also important. So you may not achieve those peaks, but probably those are people that really love it. This is what they want. They want to be extremely productive, extremely successful, have a lot of breakthrough in science in their life, and that's fine. That's what makes them happy. But maybe then if you look at their social life, maybe it sucks. Maybe they have no friends. I mean, I don't know, of course. But, you need to give somewhere in order to achieve something else, okay? And so you need to find the balance and the meaning of success that applies to you. So I hope this helps a little bit. It's not, of course, doesn't solve all the problems about imposter syndrome, but maybe at least can give you started thinking about that you are good as anybody else, and you can achieve what you want, as long as you work hard for it. Okay, let me go over this quickly. So what are the important skills that the soft skills that you should develop during your PhD? So we all know we need to go back good at research, okay? We need to be good at research, published, that's it. But there are some other things that are important. And it's not only about publishing papers. So what are they? I try to list them here. So the first one is learn to be independent. So when we start our PhD, we're like babies held by the hands by the mom or dad, you know. It's like, okay, so do another step, okay, and now, that's how it is, because we don't know anything. We don't know how to write papers, we don't know how to make research, we don't know what is research, we don't know what is progress, we don't know what is enough advancement of the state of the art, we don't know what is novelty, we haven't read many papers, etc., etc., etc. I can go on for a long time. So this is something that is developed through time. And what does it mean to be independent? You should be independent from a technical standpoint, so you should be able to learn to use tools, could be mathematical tools, programming tools, whatever research area you're working on, and use them. You should be independent methodologically, so you should be able to go through all the phase of research, from reading the state of the art and defining a problem, writing a solution, and then maybe implementing it, implementing the results, look at it, all by yourself. At the beginning, you have no idea, but then over time, little by little, you get more and more independent also from that aspect. And then finally, from a motivational point of view. So your advisor is going to, you know, kick your butt a few times when you slow down, but eventually, you don't need your butt kicked anymore. You just, you know, keep running by yourself and go forward, because even if you get rejected, or if you have achievements or whatever, you know that this is the flow. This is what you need to keep doing, okay? You don't need people pushing. I mean, to some extent, it's always good to have someone that gives you feedback about how you're doing, but you kind of need to learn to go by yourself without someone that constantly tells you to keep going. It's important also, as a soft skill, to learn to work in a team, which is kind of contradictory with what I said, to be independent, but it's also very important. So when you're going to work and have your job, you're not going to be alone. So us as faculty, we don't work alone. Most of the time, we work in teams of other PIs, other students, postdocs. And you need to be able to function well as a team, to be able to listen to other people's opinion, provide your feedback, tell your opinion, do not get feedback negatively, but actually contribute to the progress. So this is something that I think is important to develop, not just for your PhD, but for what comes after that. And I mean, as I mentioned also, be able to provide criticism while being kind, while being respectful, and at the same time be able to get criticism without becoming negative and say, oh, you don't understand what I'm doing. And this is especially true, you know, when you're working in interdisciplinary research areas in which sometimes people give you some feedback that can really, you know, hurt the research that you've done, but, you know, keep a positive attitude and then keep making progress, and be ready to change what you have done. Be reliable, I think, is a very important skill. And you know, when someone expects something from you and you're able to deliver it, which is good quality, in time, you kind of start building a reputation. And this reputation moves with you. So now you're a PhD student, then maybe you're going to work in industry, or maybe as a postdoc, and then as a faculty. This moves through your network. People know they can count on you. People know you're going to show up. People know that you're going to get the job done. And this is kind of an ephemeral thing. You know, it's not something you can write or measure, but it's something that's important to start working on now. Then, I mentioned this before, learn to be efficient. We mentioned time management. We mentioned already learn to say no. And we already mentioned push through, so I'm not going to expand on this. And let me finish. No, wait. One more. Learn to deal with stress. So PhD sucks, okay? We are all stressed. I was stressed. You were stressed. You're going to get rejected. You're going to have difficult time with your advisors. Of course, it could be also with family, external factors. So learning how to deal with this and at the same time be able to be productive, be a positive member of your family or society, of your friends, it's important. And again, this is something that, you know, takes time to develop, but, you know, it's important for me as much as it's important to have other skills like, you know, being, I don't know, able to produce good results in terms of research, you know, because it guarantees that somehow you're able to work in a steady state. You're not going to have like a sudden drop because the stress has taken over. And of course, seek help in case stress is taking over. This is also important as well. Okay, let me finish with a to-do list for have a successful PhD, in my opinion. Of course, it's not a complete list necessarily, but I think these are some important stuff. So the first one is learn how to present your research. It's extremely important to be able to sell yourself and what you have done. You're going to make good impressions. These impressions are going to create opportunities, and these opportunities are going to define the success that you're going to have, not just in your PhD, but in your career. Learn how to write, even without ChatGPT or with ChatGPT. Do they exist? I know, but you kind of need to be able to explain yourself verbally and in a written form clearly. Okay, I think these are extremely important skills that probably beyond just PhD, but especially for PhD students. Again, find a method of time management that works for you, learn yourself, and become more effective. Learn how to collaborate with your advisor, with other members of the team. You work in a team with undergraduate students if they're part of your research team, etc. Learn how to deal with rejection, how to be positive about it and not take it personally, and be able to improve your work in order to eventually get it published. And I think this is the most important, build a network of mentors. Do not be isolated. Your advisor is not the universe. There is a lot more around it. And one day, the advisor is going to be one of your mentors, but you can build way more of them. And this is going to be very useful for your career. And I think I can wrap it up here, and thank you for attending.
Would you like to ask the questions? Tom and I can bring the microphone around.
We have time for a few questions, okay? Now, if you need to go somewhere, you can leave now. But we have time for a few minutes, for a few questions.
On to you, if you have a question. Oh. I want to.
So one of my advisors when I was a student told me that young people have this sacred fire. Okay, they need to preserve the truth, and they need to preserve the high quality of the scientific discovery. And so they're going to destroy everybody that submits a paper that is not perfect. So this is not to say that many papers that are submitted are like horrible. Okay, and this is the case. And so that is totally fine. So you don't need to feel bad about rejecting a paper because there is a good chance that that paper is not complete. And it's not great. It's not written well. It's missing important parts. So this is kind of a balancing act. And I also changed myself throughout the years. So definitely as I was young, I am going to review papers regardless of the venue in the same way. And now I kind of change because I kind of know how the overall scientific community works, that some venues are way more selective, others are way less selective. So if I'm reviewing a paper for a top conference, I tend to be way more selective than if I'm reviewing a paper for, let's say, a middle tier conference, in which if some things are missing, maybe it's fine. And so again, do not feel bad about rejecting. Give positive feedback, constructive feedback, and try to think about where is this paper being submitted. Like, how other papers that are accepted in this venue look like. And sometimes if you get a few of them, you actually can tell, if some are like great and some are like so-and-so, so you get an idea of the average level. And so maybe you can also go back and look at your previous reviews and say, okay, maybe here I was too harsh. And this also, something that evolves over time, which is part of the luck when you submit a paper. You may find someone that is still, it's very strict and demanding, and some other is very relaxed. So, She is. You have a question?
Sure. Maybe I'm revealing my hand by saying this because I'm not from your department. Sure. And I don't know how things work in your department for PhD students, but at least in my department, we need to find a faculty member not from within our department. Do you have any suggestions about how one might reach out to professors in other departments to fulfill
You
that
mean
requirement?
someone external to be part of your committee?
Yes.
Yeah, usually, you can discuss with your advisor. They may know someone that works in that area, but maybe in a different department, and they could have experience. Otherwise, you can look it up and see. I mean, you're from UK, right?
Yes.
So I wouldn't say here these committee members really do too much. So it's not going to be like a choice that is going to highly impact your PhD in general, as it is, for example, selecting an advisor. But in general, you want to find someone that can give you good feedback, that can give you good, can listen to you. Maybe you can give updates periodically. So, getting some feedback maybe from other people, like say their students, like how is this person? I wouldn't say it's a very critical part, but so talk to your advisor, look for people that work more or less in that area in other department, and then reach out, and then talk to their students to see how this works.
Thank you.
For someone that's starting the PhD program, what would you tell a person, if you could go back and restart all over again, what would you tell someone like me that's just now starting, like give advice to?
You have an advisor?
Yes.
Okay, so I hope it's a good one. That is probably the biggest and most consequential decision and a good one that can produce students that can do what you want to do later. So if you want to have someone that produce faculty, then maybe look if they have produced faculty in the past, or someone that they want students that go to industry. Have they had students that go to industry in the past? Are good people to work with? There is a long set of things to look for. But I think that is probably the most important. I was lucky. So actually, when I was a student, I first reached out to a faculty who was an amazing researcher. She still is an amazing researcher. But working was very hard, very hard. So, and I kind of got this very loose engagement, not responding to emails or responding later, not giving feedback. And so I went to another mentor at that time, and I said, I'm not really working very well. Can I go to someone else? And so he gave me the suggestion to work with another researcher, another assistant professor at that time. And that has honestly changed my life. That's why I'm here now. If I went with the first route, I wouldn't be here. I would have been doing something completely different.
Hi, Dr. Silvestri. Thanks for the talk. This is more about a postdoctoral position or postdoctoral situation I'm talking about. So it's like, what do you think of the relationship you make while getting interviewed for postdocs, even if you get rejected, but they like your work and they're like, hey, the committee eventually did not select you as a potential postdoc, but I enjoyed your work and your research and all the best. And also, do you think those relationships matter in terms of like going forward in your research career?
Let me say that making a good impression is always important. Okay, so you never know. One day that person may review your paper, it may offer you a job, you may meet them at a conference, it may invite you in a comment. You never know. Okay. Postdocs are kind of a special situation because they're really tied to the money available for funding in general, and so the person that you interviewed now may not have funding for a postdoc for the next 10 years, and by then, who knows where you are. So it is important to give a good impression always. Try to do your best, but at the same time, in order to get another postdoc position, that may not be exactly, impactful. That's my. Oh, did I do this?
Oh, thanks for the talk, Dr. Silvestri. I wanted to ask about your experiences. How have you found collaborators and mentors in like your journey, and like how we can also find mentors and like collaborators, like in department conferences, anywhere. Yeah.
There are many ways of doing it. So I would say the general attitude is to be open. So if people assign you, not necessarily your advisor, but if someone else assigns you a paper to review, do it and do a good job. If you are, I know you are, but going to conferences using travel grants, And this is something that I suggest to everybody to do. So if there are conferences around that offer travel grants, I would say the general attitude was to give travel grants to students that publish in that conference, but now it's kind of shifting towards giving actually travel funds to students who did not publish in that conference so that they can increase the number of people attending because the others are coming anyway. Which, I mean, something I agree. Also, conference, not all of them, but several tend to support more. So maybe before they just used to give the registration. Well, now they actually give registration waived, and then they give the hotel and the cost of flying there. So at the end, maybe for your advisor, it's going to cost $200, and you can actually go and attend the conference. So do that, and when you are there, talk to people. Create connections at different level. Me personally, I'm not necessarily someone that, for example, at a gala dinner likes to sit with people that like to talk about work. I like to talk about other things like life, the city, or the food and whatever. But even those are important connections. So not everything needs to be technical. You don't want to go there and say, no, I did this thing with I don't know, deep neural networks. We improved this and the performance are better. Maybe nobody cares. Maybe you talk about pizza and it's fine. So you create connections, and those connections eventually are going to build up. Of course, for example, do posters. You can do posters even here at UK. There is a big poster competition. So try to get all the opportunities that come your way, use them, try to learn how to present your research, make a good impression, and eventually things will start happening.
And if you go to a conference, read some of the papers beforehand so you can people and say, wow, I read your paper and I have a question, because that's music to people's ears.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jude.
It's about time. But I would like to focus, to emphasize one thing. Your advisor is an ordinary person, so he couldn't make mistakes. So sometimes you graduate, gives you a job and you couldn't carry it out, it might not work out.
Mm-hmm.
You must have confidence in yourself. This is my own experience. All right? So thank you very much for your
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.